Let's continue by creating some 2D shapes. In this case, I want to show you the similarities and differences between the parameters that we have. For that, I'm going to select geometry parameter. I'm going to select rectangle. I'm going to also select grab and surface parameters. And these parameters should be connected to some certain shapes that we can create or we already created so that they can function. Because in this case, we are seeing them as yellow, that means they are empty parameters. To start with, I'm going to type rectangle. To create our number-based rectangle, so the plane is given already here because we can just modify the base point, which is the plane of this rectangle. So this is just based on the C plane that is given by Grasshopper. Here I type to the number slider a 10 just to connect both X and Y component to create a square-shaped grid. I want to show you that geometry is a parameter that can be connected to any kind of shape most of the time. But if I type rectangle instead of geometry, I need to connect it to a rectangle, or if I type curve, I need to connect it to a curve. This is the differentiation between them. Or in this case, I want to play with the plane where the geometry is based. So I can just connect them to the points. In this case, I don't want to create another command. I can just directly connect them to the points, so every time I don't need to worry about the planes. But I can type it as well. It doesn't matter most of the time. And here I want to have everything in Grasshopper. So I see that some of the shapes are just linked to Grasshopper. Here I right click and I can select internalize data so that everything is in Grasshopper right now and I don't need to be worried about if I lose something in Rhino. Everything will be just on Grasshopper. So let's connect rectangle to the surface that we are going to see. At the end, we are seeing solid shape, and if I connect it to a breadth, it will function as a surface. So here I can say that breadth is more general version of the solid shapes. It can be connected to a surface, it can be connected to a polished surface, anything. So let's find other ways to create rectangles. Here I want to create one by using points that we already have in here. If I show you them again, these are the points that we created before. And if I connect both of them, I'm going to have a rectangle as a result. So let's preview off the rest of the things so that we can clearly see everything. So if I connect it to a surface, I'm going to see that this rectangle is the boundary of the surface at the end. To show the differences, I can also connect a geometry to a breadth because it's also another type of the geometry. I can just connect breadth directly to the result of the rectangle, so it will function anyway. So let's create the grid rectangle so that we can see some continuation. In the future, we are going to work on some parametrical designs. So it's just to show you some kind of basis. This is our grids and I connect it to the size of the X and Y, the number slider. And I can create just another number slider to play with the continuation of these rectangles. So here I can play with it, or I can play with the X or Y components. And I can just connect it to a rectangular shape. So if I don't want to see a surface on it, we are going to see a grid line at the end. I'm going to show you another way to build rectangles based on the points that are on some curves. So I'm just double clicking on these wires. These things are called relay. They don't function as anything, but it's the thing that I'm connecting here. If the parameter that I'm connecting to the command is very far from the origin, I can just use relays to modify the location of the wire. So if I'm scripting something complicated that are functionable, so let's type curve end and curve midpoints to take the midpoint or take the endpoints of the curve and use them as bases, as you can see in here, or I can select the end of the line and reconnect it to our shape, and we can see the differences in between the geometries that we create at the end. So this can be useful in the future for us. This is just the base. This is another design right now, but we are learning here how we can use these commands in a functionable way. I can change the curve and then play in any time I want. So let's create this time. You can create from polygons. If you type polygon, we are going to access the command related to it and select the points as plane. So I'm going to have different planes. I'm going to have the same shape on them, and I can just change the radius. So then you can play with the size of these polygons, or I can change the number of the sizes so that I can play with the triangle as well as another kind of octagonal shapes. If I connect them to the breps directly, it's going to give me separate surfaces, but they will be in the same parameter. So I'm going to here show you how we can select some points in the surfaces so that we can take as a base for our polygons or any kind of shape that you want to make in the future. If I say populate geometry and I just connect it to our brep to function as a surface base, I can just see randomize point locations in here. So if I type 5 to number, I'm going to reduce the number that I'm going to give, and I just connect the number slider to the seed, and I can play with the random selection of the placements of these points. So here we can see better what I'm trying to do. We can have something more logical like this, or that is like a continuated grid. If I say surface grid and select that brep, I'm going to have already defined UV values, so let's go over them in scale. If I just type 3 as number and we have less base points in here to clarify what I'm trying to do, or we already have created grid so that we can use it as the base. We can play with the continuation of it. We can play with the size of the grid, or we can play with the size of the polygons that we have. So this is about it. I'm going to show you the circular version of it as well. If I type circle, I'm going to select circle CNR. This is the most common one that we can use. So this is the center point, so I can select the same thing again as a base plane, and I can select some radius that I want to build. If I type, it's going to be maybe too big. I can reduce it just to see if it's functioning well, or I can change it because the radius can be radians also. It depends on our design, but in the scale, we are going to have to type something bigger as number. So here I type 300 and play with the radius, or I can just directly type regular number. So this is the difference between radius and a regular number. This is all about it for now. Or I can just finally change the base points of the circle. And I just reconnect it to the point and I select the center. Thank you. Let's continue.